September the 19th is a special day for us at Emory. We're both pleased and privileged to have as visiting professor today Dr. Guy L. Odom, the James B. Duke Professor of Neurosurgery at Duke University, the trainer of a large number of practicing and academic neurosurgeons. Dr. Odom is spending a 3-day visit with us now, going over various aspects of neurosurgery. Dr. Odom, it's a great pleasure to have you here, and welcome to Emory, and I'm certainly pleased to be with you today to make this tape.
George, it's a pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to it for a long time.
Good, good. I thought that what we would touch on today are several aspects of neurosurgery that Dr. Odom has been involved in his early training career, in his early practice career, in his career at Duke, and then focus perhaps the latter part of the discussion on his relationship to the American Association of Neurological Surgeons, the former Harvey Cushing Society, or as most of us know it, the AANS. Dr. Odom, I think our audience would be very interested in just learning how you came to be interested in neurosurgery. What made your decision to go into the specialty?
Well, George, this is often hard to say, but I attended Tulane Medical School in New Orleans, and at that time there was only one neurosurgeon in New Orleans. This was in the very early 30s. In fact, in 1932, while watching a particular surgeon operate on a patient for a brain tumor, I was informed by one of the members of the house staff that this patient was not going to survive his operation. And this sort of stimulated my interest in the problem of neurosurgery, since there was only one man at that time in New Orleans doing neurosurgery, and from the information that was obtained, he wasn't doing too good a job. And so I thought that this was possibly a new field to get into and see whether or not we could improve the situation.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We all know from record that you pursued your neurosurgical residency training at the Montreal Neurological Institute, one of the foremost training programs then as now. And at this institution, you came under the influence of Dr. Penfield, Dr. Wilder Penfield, and Dr. William Cone. We would love to hear some of your remembrances of that association.
Well, those were very happy days and very pleasant days, except for the weather. It was extremely cold, and we spent a great deal of time in the hospital. We had very little time off. We were off about every 5th weekend and one night a week. So we didn't have to worry too much about the outside weather at that time, except on the weekends when we were off. Dr. Cone and Dr. Penfield were both outstanding individuals. They were two entirely different people. I couldn't imagine any two that were different in so many traits as far as they were concerned. Dr. Penfield was quite a disciplinarian, almost an introvert as far as the hospital was concerned, but on the outside he was an extremely friendly, outgoing individual. Mm-hmm. Dr. Cone, on the other hand, was very friendly in the hospital. He worked constantly. He was in the hospital from early in the morning till 1 or 2 o'clock at night, often making rounds with the patients and checking on patients at 2 o'clock in the morning, trying to set up things for the next day. He was really a difficult individual to understand and try to rationalize at times.
Dr. Cone.
I'm talking about Dr. Cone. He almost made a martyr of himself as far as the care of his patients and his activities about the hospital. I don't know of another man that didn't have some type of hobby. he had no type of hobby or outside interest except work and his medical problems as far as the hospital was concerned. It seemed like he shunned social activity. His wife was just the opposite. She entertained and took care of the newcomers on the staff, had cocktail parties and dinners at home. And if Dr. Cone found out that she was having the staff out to our house, well, he'd be certain to arrange an operation or some activity in the hospital so that he wouldn't have to attend. This was even true from the standpoint of Christmas and New Year's Eve or any type of particular holiday event. He always saw that there was some type of procedure that would keep him in the institute. If something, a social event came on, he didn't have a patient in the hospital to operate on, he'd pick up the phone and call the French hospital and find out if there wasn't something over there that needed attention and would be moved in. One particular Christmas Eve, when I was resident, left all the rest of the house staff off, and I took calls for the interns and assistant residents and was covering the whole service, because at that time my wife and children had returned to the United States. And about 10 o'clock that Christmas Eve, I was up in my room getting ready to go to bed and listening to Christmas music, and I had a phone call from Dr. Cone wanting to know what I was doing, and I told him. He said, well, come on down and meet me in the lab, and we went down and worked till about 2 o'clock Christmas morning in the laboratory. But he was an unusual individual from that standpoint. If you had some medical problem, he'd be the one that you wanted to take care of you.
I see.
Because he saw that everything was done, and if it wasn't done, he did it himself. I can recall one time he had ordered an enema for a patient, and he came around in the afternoon, the enema hadn't been given, so he went over in the supply room, got a enema can and tubing and mixed up a soap-sud enema and brought it back and hung the can on the wall and went to insert the end of the tube into the patient. As he did, he pulled out the tube from the enema can and the whole thing went down his back. But this was the way he handled patients. He was an extraordinary individual when it came to patient care. He was an excellent surgeon. Now, Dr. Penfield was a different individual. Dr. Penfield designated responsibility, and he was a strict disciplinarian inside the hospital. He loved to play squash. We had a squash court in the hospital. And in the afternoons, 5, 6 o'clock, early evening, after he had been working in the office, he'd frequently come down and make rounds and then ask to have a squash game. And we'd go up to the 5th floor and have a squash game, and usually he'd beat the hell out the house staff because he was a 3-letter man when he was at Princeton.
Yes.
Baseball, football, and he was kept in shape the whole time.
Would it be a fair question to ask which of the two men had the greatest influence on you?
Well, it's hard to say. I think actually Dr. Cone did, from the standpoint of patient care, and also from the standpoint of neurosurgical training, because you were with him so much.
Yes.
The only time you were with Dr. Penfield really was to make rounds and while you were in the operating room. But Dr. Cone lived at the Institute. He was there day and night, and you couldn't go on one of the floors that you didn't run into him. And Dr. Penfield stayed in his office most of the time doing his writing, and or was in the operating room. So you had much closer association with Dr. Cone than you had with Dr. Penfield.
It's obvious that this institution had an impact on the neurosurgery, not only in the North American continent, but on the world. What would you say were some of the factors that went into making the MNI a great place?
Well, I think that it was Dr. Penfield. Actually, as far as that aspect of it is concerned, he was well renowned, not only as a neurosurgeon, but as a neurophysiologist and a neuropathologist, and his work with silver staining and different types of staining microscopic material brought people from all over the world to work in the laboratory with him. Mm-hmm. And I think that this was the biggest part as far as the Institute was concerned, that they were known all over the world. Yes. He had patients from all over the world sent in, especially patients with epilepsy, and it attracted all neurosurgeons from Europe and India, Far East, and so forth to visit the Institute.
Definitely an international man.
Oh, no question. He's quite an international individual.
Yes. Now, when you left there, finished your training, you went to New Orleans. Was your intention then to stay an academic neurosurgeon yourself, or was that your intention?
Yes, I planned to return to New Orleans, and I had an appointment at Louisiana State University, and I stayed in New Orleans for a period of approximately a year, or a little less than a year, before moving on to Duke and Durham.
That must have been an interesting switch to leave your hometown where you had set up an appointment. Someone must have had some influence on you to get you to Duke.
Well, I don't think anyone had any particular individual had any influence, George. It was the fact that when I was in New Orleans, I had to move around from one hospital to another. We had patients in 4 times 5 different hospitals. We had no actual neurosurgical house staff in any of these hospitals. And when the opportunity arose that I could take my hat off and stay under one roof, both from the standpoint of teaching and investigative work and research work and clinical material, it was an opportunity that I think thought at that time couldn't be passed up. And this was the main reason I moved from New Orleans to Durham, to Duke, because I thought that it was an ideal way to practice neurosurgery. And when I went to Duke, Durham, it wasn't because of house staff help, because we didn't have a neurosurgical training program in those days.
Yes. You went to Duke in 1943, is that correct?
In February 1943, during the war.
But rumor has it that Dr. Darrell Hart, who was the chairman of surgery there, was rather persuasive in attracting you to Duke. Is that?
Well, there's no question about that, but I don't think I went to Duke because of Darrell. I knew who Dr. Hart was and so forth as a general surgeon, and I knew what he was doing as far as Duke University's medical school was concerned, and Dr. Davison. But I wouldn't say that I went because Darrell was professor of surgery at Duke. It was interesting how it happened. Really, I had no intention of ever leaving New Orleans when I settled in New Orleans. And one Sunday morning, I had a phone call about 7 o'clock in the morning, and was a little sleepy and tired because we'd been out to the French quarters the night before. And Dr. Hart was on the other end of the line offering me an opportunity to come to Duke. And I, at that time, completely refused the invitation to come up and see the setup. I'm not insinuating at this time that he made an outright offer to me over the phone the first time he called me, but it was an invitation to come up and visit Durham, and I flatly turned it down. I don't think that Darrell realized at the time that he called that there was the hour difference in time. It was 8 o'clock back in Durham and 7 o'clock on Sunday morning in New Orleans. And everything went along till the next Sunday morning at exactly the same time, 7 o'clock in the morning again. I had another phone call from Darrell, and we discussed the situation at some length this time, and he was very persuasive about coming up and just seeing what the Duke setup was like. And I accepted that invitation and went up and visited with Dr. Hart, and liked what I saw very much. And
yes.
When the offer was made, I accepted it.
Yes. Now, shortly after that, you were full-time at Duke, and then Dr. Woodhall had returned from his military duty, and you were both associated together. You neither chose the other, but yet you, it would be an interesting discussion as to the relationship of you and Dr. Woodhall. The way you...
Well, I went to Duke in '43, and at that time, of course, Dr. Woodall wasn't there. And it was interesting to hear the various comments that were being passed around the grapevine as to what was going to happen when Barnes came back.
Yes.
Most of the people, I guess, that may hear this know Dr. Woodall's reputation and so forth, that he was a little bit stormy at times with various people that he was associated with, and they all were anxious to see what was going to happen when the two of us got together and had to work in the same program. But I don't know of anything that's ever happened to me that was happier than working with Barnes.
Yes.
That is Dr. Woodall. We had a very close relationship from '46 through the present time. And I don't think that we ever had any outright disagreement or quarrel or problems as to how the service was going to be run or what should be done. We discussed everything right down the line, from the administrative aspect to the care of patients. We didn't always agree as to how each patient should be handled, but we discussed it, and it worked out very well.
Yes.
So we had a very close relationship, a very fine relationship as far as it's concerned.
You actually rounded together on each other's patients 7 days a week.
We made rounds for the whole time that we were together, every day, discussed the x-rays and the patient's clinical problems. We never operated together. We've often been asked whether or not we assisted one another in the operating room, but this was never occurred. I don't know whether or not we would have ended up as such good friends if
Possibly not.
we had. But we always called one another to the operating room. If he was operating and exposed a tumor or an aneurysm or it was an interesting problem, well, he always gave us a buzz, and I'd go up and look at what was being removed, or answer questions as to whether or not thought this ought to be done or that ought to be done. And
Yes.
the same thing when I was operating. I always called him, and we always discussed that particular operative procedure and what ought to be done and what shouldn't be done. And this went on for years until he decided he wanted to move into administrative
Yes.
duties and accepted an appointment as dean of the medical school.
Yes. That was in 1960, was it not?
That was 1960.
And then you became
and
the
then I
full-time...
became chairman of the department in 1960. And he was dean, and then moved on up from dean to vice provost, and did an outstanding job in the administrative field, but gradually got out of the clinical work.
Yes.
He is responsible, I think outright responsible, for the building of the new hospital that we have at Duke, that's just opened in the last month.
Yes. He had a good flair for administrative work.
Oh, there's no question. He's got a good flair for the English language. Outstanding as far as his writing is concerned.
Yes.
He would sit down and write a paper, and the original would usually be the final, whereas if I write something, I got to go over it and over it and over it and 5 or 6 times. But Barnes could either sit at a dictaphone or use a pen paper, and his first writing was usually his final.
We often during training heard you refer to him as Bob rather than Barnes. Was that just we misheard, or was there a nickname?
This was, I guess, a sort of a nickname that he was tagged with, and on an informal basis, we referred to him as Bob right along.
I see.
As he's growing older, we're going back to calling him Barnes, I guess, most of the time. He still, although he's retired now, he still comes into the hospital every day. He's one of the distinguished physicians for the Veterans Administration. I think he's the only distinguished physician in neurosurgery for the veterans. There's a distinguished physician in neurology. And up until the recent illness of Mrs. Penfield, he traveled.
Woodhall.
I mean Mrs. Woodall.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Woodall. He traveled around the country and helped with the various programs at the veterans hospitals. And
he was always supportive of the Veterans Administration hospital programs, and I think a lot of this may have dated from his World War II
I think that's right, George.
Yeah, and his work with peripheral nerve surgery.
That's right. He did an outstanding work with the peripheral nerve problem during World War II.
I just glanced at some of the figures of your of the fruits of your residency training program between you and Dr. Woodall at Duke, and I was amazed to see that you had trained over the course of, since 1943, a total of 42 residents. And of these residents, 14 of them are in teaching institutions around the country, and 9 of them are heads of divisions or department. I'm sure a lot of us would be interested to know, what are your secrets for training residents? What type of formula do you use that's been so successful? Or can you share that with us? If those are intangibles, I know, but...
This is something that you shouldn't ask as far as it's concerned, because it's a very difficult problem to try to answer. I think that we were very fortunate to be able to select men of the caliber that we had. Now, I think the majority of the people that we trained came through Duke Medical School and were on the house staff at Duke. Some of them we had opportunities to know while they were in undergraduate school before they entered medical school. And we actually went out and recruited the top students that were in the first years of medicine, and gave them opportunities to work in the laboratory during the summer.
Yes.
And then other individuals, for instance, as yourself, that came to us from other institutions, were interviewed, and contacts were made with the people where they trained and so forth. It's awful hard, I think, at times for a program director to rely just on letters of recommendation
Yes.
of an individual.
Yes.
I always tell the trainee that is applying either to our program or other programs to always apply for his first year of general surgery in the institution that he lists as his #1 preference.
Yes.
I think that if he does this, he sort of puts his foot in the door, because it gives the people there an opportunity to see what type of individual he really is, not depending entirely upon the individual's scholastic ability, but his ability to handle patients and how he
Yes.
gets along with the
Yes.
house staff as well as the senior staff. Almost every letter, and I don't think I've ever received but maybe 1 or 2 letters of recommendation that didn't state that the individual was a top-notch, that he did very well, that he was above average, and so forth. The particular applicant isn't going to give you names for references of people that
Yes.
he knows are going to write letters that are detrimental as far as
Yes.
his work is concerned.
Yes.
And so I think it's a better opportunity for that individual to have a year in the particular institution that he's
Yes.
going to apply for his residency training. I think that
I've heard you state, or think I've heard you state, that the changes in medical school curricula, and in many institutions, these changes have virtually eliminated neurosurgery topics from the curriculum, have had an adverse effect on candidates ultimately choosing neurosurgery programs, or the top-notch students choosing programs. Would you care to comment on this? Or?
well, I think that that is true. I mean, we used to be very closely associated with the medical students during their sophomore year, their junior year, and their senior year. And we had them for fairly long periods of time in junior year and senior year. So we got to know the students very well. And now we are isolated, not only neurosurgery, but a number of the specialties. We only have contact with the students for 5 lectures
Yes.
during the core of surgical training. Now, if they want to take an elective in neurosurgery, they have an opportunity to do so. They may go through an internship and not ever be on a neurosurgical program. And I don't believe anybody knows what they like unless they taste it. That's
Yes.
including beer or olives or sex. I mean,
Yes.
I think you got to taste something to know whether or not
Yes.
this is something that you
Yes.
want to do.
Yes.
And I think this has sort of isolated a number of the specialties from the students, and I think this has been detrimental to program directors who are trying to select people
Yes.
for their program.
Yes. In addition to all of the responsibilities that you had at Duke, your clinical responsibilities, your heavy operating load, your training of residents, you also found time to enter into and become very active in a number of national organizations. And a look at your curriculum vitae shows that you were president of almost every major neurosurgical society in the United States. One, of course, which we're very interested to hear about is the American Association of Neurological Surgeons, or the AANS. You were president of that organization in 1971-72. I'd like to really go back a little bit, though, and ask you, when did you become a member of the society, and what do you remember about your early days in the AANS?
Judge, I can't be absolutely certain, but I think it was either 1946 or 1947.
Yes.
When I was taken into what was then the Harvey Cushing Society. And of course, as a young man in those days, I was always flabbergasted to have the opportunity to meet the people that were actually, I guess you'd call them the first generation of
Yes.
neurosurgeons.
Yes.
People.
Who were some of the neurosurgeons in the society that impressed you when you were a member or became a member?
Well, I think one of the, well, there were so many of them. Dr. Bucy was always a workhorse as far as the society was concerned. And his work with the Journal of Neurosurgery. In the early days, he took it from when it was about to go bankrupt, go on the skids, and brought it up and made it into an outstanding journal. His work with Louise Eiserhardt, I think that every member of the association has to be extremely grateful
Yes.
for what Paul did in those days. Other individuals that were hard workers and were extremely outstanding individuals was Bronson Ray. Bronson, I thought, did an outstanding, made an outstanding contribution as far as neurosurgery. Davidoff was another individual that I thought was top. Of course, you can't pass up old Pappy Semmes.
Yes.
Pappy was one of the outstanding contributors to neurosurgery from a clinical standpoint. I don't know of any outstanding basic research work that Pappy did, but I think that he contributed in many ways to neurosurgery.
He inspired a lot of people.
Oh, Lord, there's no question about that aspect of it. No question about it. He's just a lovable individual. Lyle Davis, of course, from Chicago, was another. Dr. Naffziger.
Yes.
These were all, there just was so many. I can't leave Dr. Penfield out. Dr. Cushing, of course, was not living in the days when I first
Yes.
went into the Harvey Cushing Society. Dr. Horrax was. So they were really the first generation of neurosurgery in this country.
How many people do you feel were in the society approximately when you joined? Would you all fit in a small room?
No, it was larger than that, George, at that time. Of course, the society started out with about 15 individuals.
Yes.
When it was organized, when the Harvey Cushing Society was organized.
Yes.
There were about 3 of them got together. I think Dr. Sachs was made spokesman to contact various people as far as it was concerned.
Yes.
There's a classical statement, and I don't guess it's awful to repeat because it's in writing, that he was sent to contact Dr. Dandy to join the Harvey Cushing Society. And of course, Dandy and Cushing had some disagreements, as well as he had Frazier. And when Sachs asked him if he was be willing to join, he was told that Frazier was going to be a member. He made the statement that he'd had nothing to do with it if Frazier was going to be associated with it.
I see.
Those were personality conflicts that occurred in these very outstanding individuals in the early days. And then it gradually grew, and I guess around 45, 46, there were approximately 100 members, maybe not quite that many.
I see.
Then there was difficulty at times of people getting into the Harvey Cushion Society, and they began to branch off and get together and form other organizations, since they weren't taken into the senior society, as it was called in those days, the Society of Neurological Surgeons. Actually, the Society of Neurological Surgeons was the first neurosurgical society that was organized.
Yes.
And then the second one was the Harvey Cushion
Yes.
Society. And I'm not certain to state, but it was organized by 2 or 3 men getting together and then going up and discussing the situation with Cushion,
Yes.
and he agreed to
Yes.
using his name and the organization of it.
Mm-hmm. We've seen a number of, or a few, bends and turns in societies, or what one would call shifts. A lot of the young neurosurgeons today hear a lot of reference to the Mayfield proclamation, or the shifts that were brought about by the Mayfield resolution. Were you involved in the
I don't think
backrooms of that?
anybody was involved in that except this was a presidential address that Frank made in New York, and it was later accepted by the board of the AANS. And I guess you're referring to a problem of making the AANS spokesman for neurological surgery in
Yes.
this country. Is
Yes.
that the thing that you're referring
Well, I'm
to?
just
And
seeing-
changing the name from the Harvey Cushion Society to the AANS?
It's more the philosophy of the shifts that, say, went on then. The society seemed to have changed from not necessarily a small organization under the name of our founder, but to a more of a broader type of society, representative of more representative of American neurosurgery. That is the type of shift that I'm talking about.
Well, at that time, the society was not a small society.
All right.
The American Association of Neurological Surgeons, or the Harvey Cushion Society, was a fair-sized organization.
Mm-hmm.
And one reason, I think, and the main reason for changing the name of the Harvey Cushion Society to the American Association of Neurological Surgeons was to identify the organization.
Yes.
Especially from the standpoint of the National Institute of Health and federal grants. 99 people out of 100 didn't know what the Harvey Cushion Society was.
Yes.
But if you said the American Association of Neurological Surgeons, formerly the Harvey Cushion Society, they would immediately recognize that you were dealing with a medical organization pertaining to neurosurgery. And so in order to try to help from the standpoint of attaining federal grants from the National Institute of Health, the name was changed, and the organization was then declared as the spokesman for neurosurgery in this country. But this was Frank's idea, and it was voted upon by the American Board of Neurological Surgery and was passed. There was a great deal of discussion of dropping the name of Harvey Cushion.
I remember that.
Because this was the way it was in the past, and they thought that this should be retained to identify the organization, and therefore the part of the title formerly the Harvey Cushing Society was added to the AANS.
Yes. Do you feel that the society is meeting that charge that the AANS truly represents American neurosurgery? Now that may be a little bit of a hard question here on
Yeah,
tape.
well, it brings up quite a argument, I guess, as far as the neurosurgeons in the country are concerned. And you might as well talk about the Congress of Neurological Surgeons, because it was organized with a younger group, and I guess as many members as the American Association of Neurological Surgeons is concerned. You may be more familiar with the data as far as numbers are concerned than I am. Mm-hmm. But I think that practically all of the members of the Congress, except a few, belong to the ANS. Is that right, or is that wrong?
There would be a number of individuals in the Congress who would be board certified, or board qualified but not certified, who would be in the Congress, who would not yet be in the AANS.
That is the basic difference as far as it's concerned.
Yeah.
The AANS requires board certification for membership.
Yes.
And the Congress does not require board certification.
But qualification, yes.
But qualification.
Yes.
That's right. In other words, this means meeting the requirements of the board as far as their training is concerned, but not actually being certified by the board.
That's correct.
And I think that the Congress has done an outstanding job as far as it's concerned from the standpoint of its organization with its meetings and its teaching and finding a place for the members, for the people that are in neurosurgery but are not certified.
Yes.
The big problem that often comes up is, why aren't these men certified? Why don't they go ahead and take their boards and become certified? I think that is going to be important in this country, that almost every individual in the practice of medicine, the particular specialty, even including family practice now, becomes certified from the standpoint of the federal government.
Yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if they don't put restrictions on the care as far as certification is concerned. And the number, I don't know the number of neurosurgeons that are not certified that belong to the Congress. Now, there are a number of them that are in the process. They're in their 2 years of training, and they can belong to the Congress during this 2 years of training before they become eligible to take their boards. So that is one group, and then there's another group in the Congress that have taken their boards but have not passed their boards. And then there's a third group that are individuals that have not thought that board certification was necessary and object to having to take an examination. Yes. So you got three groups, I think, in the Congress that are not board certified.
That could more or less introduce another subject that I would like to hear some comment from you in the few minutes that we have left. Do you feel that we are training too many neurosurgeons?
Judge, since 1967, I have felt that we were reaching a point of training too many neurosurgeons in this country, and tried to warn the board about that aspect of the problem. In fact, I presented a paper in Key Biscayne in 1967 on problems as far as neurosurgical training was concerned, and just threw out a warning that I thought that we were beginning to train too many neurosurgeons, and I did so again. In 72, somewhere along in there.
In the Boston meeting,
and,
did you?
Yes, at the Boston meeting. And, of course, everybody doesn't agree to this.
Yes.
One I know very definitely, and has a big following, and that's Dr. Bucy. Dr. Paul doesn't think that we're training too many. He thinks that we are not handling all the problems that are neurosurgical problems in this country, and we have permitted other specialties to come in and take over some of the neurosurgical problems, and if these were taken back by the neurosurgeons, that they'd have enough work to do.
Yes.
But I'm thinking about the future. If we continue at the rate that we're training and approving more neurosurgical training programs in this country, this is going to turn out more neurosurgeons.
Yes.
And I don't think that we're dying off in neurosurgery as fast as we fill in the pot. And so I think that we're going to run into a situation that we're going to overflow or saturate the field as far as neurosurgery.
Let's take, I'm sure that a lot of the individuals who may be watching this tape are young neurosurgeons who are interested both in academic and private practice. Let's take a young neurosurgeon that's very eager to make his spurs, who's interested in academic neurosurgery. He's finishing his training program. What sort of advice could you give an individual that's interested in an academic career that's about to go out into his practice life, finishing training?
Well, I don't know whether it's very helpful as far as giving advice is concerned, because if he's planning to go into academic training, it depends on whether or not there's an academic appointment that he can get into. And at the present time, I don't know of very many academic appointments that are open around the country, except programs that will decide, well, we will add another man to the program.
Yes.
And I think that it's very hard at times to give someone advice from this standpoint.
Well, let's say we've got
I think there's so many things that come into selecting where an individual wants to practice.
All right.
And the people that he wants to practice with. Going out, and if you're going to join a group, is even worse than selecting a wife with somebody that you're going to live with. And
you mean you should use more care in selecting your partner?
That's right. I mean, there's no question about that aspect of it. And today, you hear, well, this guy accepted an appointment. He was there for 6 months or 2 months, and he picked up and he left. I think that we're getting to a point, possibly, is the young man may want to expect too much as he starts out. I think that he ought to be satisfied to really accept a good spot where he has chance of advancement, rather than worrying about what the financial gains are going to be the first year or second year that he's out on his own.
I think one of the points I had in mind was we seem to be in an era of, or seems to be a tendency to subspecialization. Do you think there is a place for the young man to go and concentrate in one area? For example, vascular neurosurgery or pituitary neurosurgery. Is this the way for, say, a young academically oriented neurosurgeon to go, or to earn his spurs, or to make a name?
Well, I think that particular individual, after he's had excellent training in general surgery, can subspecialize in pituitary surgery or vascular surgery and so forth. But I don't think that we ought to be training from the very beginning various classes of neurosurgery. There's been talk of training the trauma neurosurgeon so that he doesn't have to worry about doing aneurysms and tumors and so forth, and that he can go into the small cities and towns in the country and send in the major problems as far as neurosurgery to neurosurgical centers. I don't think that we ought to be training that type of individual. I think that if an individual wants to go through a general training program and then decides, well, he's going to settle in this area and he's going to restrict his practice, I think that that's perfectly all right. But I think that an individual, if he's going to subspecialize, ought to have his general neurosurgical training and then branch out or take some additional training or go somewhere and spend some time with someone that's doing vascular surgery or pediatric surgery or pituitary surgery as you're doing, and really have an opportunity to sink his teeth into it. But I don't think that this ought to be done from the very beginning. I think this is going to be the way we go. I think that in groups we're going to subspecialize in centers, and one individual is going to be doing vascular and pituitaries by another, and trauma is going to be the main problem of another. And I think you're doing that to some extent here already.
One of our esteemed colleagues, who most of us know, wrote a very provocative editorial a few years ago that made the New England Journal of Medicine entitled "Neurosurgery May Die." It's a rather interesting article. Do you feel that the specialty is quite alive and well?
Oh, I don't think there's any question about it.
Okay.
I think that it's flourishing and popping at the seams. I don't think there's any question about it. I think that the one big problem that I'd like to see, and that is the neurosurgeons in this country enter into more of the research aspect of neurosurgery, either in the laboratory or clinical neurosurgery. And if we don't, we're going to start dropping behind again, and the people in Europe or Japan or the Scandinavian countries and Great Britain are going to regain the lead as far as medicine is concerned. There's no question that neurosurgery was born in this country and reared in this country, and I don't think that we ought to let it sort of fade away. And I think that if we don't become aggressive as far as our investigative work and clinical work is concerned, we're going to let the Japanese and Scandinavians and so forth take the lead.
Yes. What do you think that neurosurgery will be like 50 years from now? And that's a wide open
Lord.
Reply. You can take any direction you want.
Well, this is something that I can hardly imagine, George.
Yes.
I think that by that time we're going to have an answer as far as malignant brain tumors are concerned.
Yes.
I think that in all probability we're going to be treating malignant tumors by chemotherapy. I don't think that we'll be doing any surgery as far as they're concerned.
Yes.
I think that in all probability by then we'll have devised methods of handling spinal cord regeneration. I think that this is going to come about. The same thing, additional methods of handling peripheral nerve problems. But I think it's a wide open field. It's hard to come up with new ideas at times, but when we stop and think back what neurosurgery was back at the turn of the century, and then in around 1920 and 1930 and 1940, it's hard to visualize the marked advances that have taken place, and especially in the last decade.
Look at the CT.
the problem, we used to pray that we had some method of localization of lesions within the intracranial cavity that were non-invasive, and worked on it. And now look what you have. The problem of the use of the microscope in doing vascular lesions and so forth, intracranial vascular lesions, has brought about marked changes as far as techniques are concerned. Operating on the pituitary gland and micropituitary adenomas, whoever thought that this could be done, going in and removing very small tumors of this size. Are we going to be able to attack 2 and 3 millimeter tumors of glial nature in the brain with a stereotactic apparatus, as Hunter Sheldon suggested we do?
Yes.
He's working on that aspect of it at the present time, and this may come about. So I think it's a wide open field. I don't think any of the research aspects of the brain have all been accomplished. I think it's still wide open to anybody that's willing to work hard, but there's an awful lot of work going to have to be associated with it.
It's exciting. It even gives us more incentive for the research aspects of neurosurgery. I wish that we had more time today, but we are getting to the end of our interview. It is certainly thrilling for me to see someone like yourself who's maintained such tremendous enthusiasm for neurosurgery, Dr. Odom, and it's certainly been a pleasure for all of us to have you come here today and grant us this interview. Thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure.